The meeting will now come to order. Welcome to the May 10th, 2021 meeting of the City of Raleigh Board of Adjustment. My name is Rodney Swink and I'm chair of the board. I'm joined by fellow board members John Kuntz, Donald Mile, Kathy Rudisell, Stephen Kinney, Justin Sutton, Michael Rainey, and Marvin Butler. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body that is governed by the North Carolina General Statutes and the city's Unified Development Ordinance. We conduct evidentiary hearings on requests for variances and special use permits, among other requests. The Board of Adjustment assures that the due process rights of the parties are protected when hearing cases. Since today's meeting will be conducted remotely, in addition to the general quasi-judicial rules, today's hearing will be conducted in accordance with state statutes that allow for remote quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings during the current COVID-19 states of emergency. Before we begin the evidentiary hearings on today's agenda, I ask our attorney to briefly explain for the participants how we will be conducting today's evidentiary hearings.
Thank you, Mr. Swink. My name is Catherine Hill, and I am the attorney for the Raleigh Board of Adjustment. Today's evidentiary hearings are going to proceed very similar to a regular meeting with a few minor adjustments. First, all witnesses must be sworn in. Because of the remote format, individuals as well as staff members who are participating today have already signed a written oath form, and that oath will be reaffirmed on the record as they testify today. The participants have also already provided written consent to today's remote format. We will begin with the staff report and presentation from a member of the planning department. As a reminder, the standards that the applicant must meet for approval are in the UDO. They are also set forth in the staff report and the applicant's application. The standards will be discussed by staff and the applicant throughout the hearing. The burden is on the applicant to provide competent material and substantial evidence as to each of the required standards to be granted the request. Following staff's presentation, the applicant will be acknowledged to present their cases and witnesses. The board will acknowledge the attorney or the applicant first as the point person for the application. Following the applicant, anyone else signed up to speak in support or opposition to the request will be given an opportunity to speak. The applicant will then have the opportunity for a rebuttal and a closing statement. When all testimony is complete, the board will close the evidentiary hearing, deliberate, and vote. Following the meeting, the board's decision will be prepared with written findings of fact and conclusions of law, which will be incorporated into the meeting minutes, draft meeting minutes, and adopted at the next meeting. I also just want to give a reminder to the board members that when under the COVID law that we're operating under, when you're voting or speaking, we either have to see you on camera or you have to state your name each time before you speak. So just keep that in mind, especially when you're voting on the cases. So with that, Mr. Swink, I'll give it back to you.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll now conduct the evidentiary hearings on today's agenda. As our attorney stated, the standard the applicant must meet to be granted the request is set forth in the UDO, and the board's decisions must be based upon competent, material, and substantial evidence related to the applicable standard. In the interest of efficiency, if you will be speaking at a hearing today, please focus your testimony and arguments on the applicable standard, not personal preference or opinion. Witnesses may testify as to facts to which they are competent to testify, so long as those facts relate to the legal standards. In addition, lay or non-expert witness testimony is limited to facts, not opinions. Focusing your testimony and arguments on the applicable facts and standards will allow the board to hear cases in an efficient and timely manner. So let's move on to the business. First, we're going to begin with old business. Evidentiary hearing 2. This is 11009 Ingleside Place. Westchester commercial property owner, variances BOA 0010-2021. This is a continuance. I'm sorry, I've jumped ahead of myself. I kept thinking that sounded strange. How could it be at number 2? We haven't done 1 yet. I apologize. Let us start over. Again, this is old business, and this is evidentiary hearing 1. This case is 741 Mills Street, Peggy Jen, property owner. This is a special use permit case, BOA 0007-2021. This evidentiary hearing was continued from the April 19th, 2021 BOA meeting. The applicant's attorney informed staff ahead of today's meeting that the applicant would like to continue the evidentiary hearing on this matter to the next Board of Adjustment meeting. The applicant's attorney is present today. We will start by hearing from the applicant's attorney regarding this continuance request. Mr. Pettish, welcome.
Quill, I don't know if you guys have switched over yet. Mr. Pettish was on the line. I don't know
Okay.
if somebody needs to unmute him.
I just was unmuted. Thank you very much. My name is Andy Pettish. I'm an attorney at Pettish Law, 127 West Hargett Street, Suite 500 here in Raleigh. I'm here in a limited capacity in representing Ms. Peggy Jin, who is the applicant in this matter, seeking a special use permit for a live-work accessory use. The limitation of my representation is to appear to request a continuance. I have agreed with Ms. Jin that if the continuance is granted, that I would represent her going forward in presenting this matter, this case, to the Board of Adjustment. And we are requesting a continuance on the grounds, one, that we would ask that it be conducted in-person hearing, ideally. Hopefully the board, I believe, may be resuming in-person hearings in the not too distant future. And then secondly, because Ms. Jin had reached out to me last week, Thursday, but due to my schedule, I was not able to return her call and speak with her until Friday evening, at which point I agreed to assist her in this matter, but I have not had a chance to prepare for this hearing today, and so would request on those grounds as well.
Okay, well, thank you. In that case, we're going to continue the evidentiary hearing to the June 14th, 2021 Board of Adjustment meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And now let us move along, still in old business. This is evidentiary hearing 2. This is 11009 Ingleside Place. Westchester Commercial is the property owner. These are variances BOA 0010-2021. This evidentiary hearing was continued from the April 19th, 2021 BOA meeting. The applicant's attorney informed staff ahead of today's meeting that the applicant would like to continue the evidentiary hearing on this matter to the next Board of Adjustment meeting in June. The applicant's attorney is present today. We'll start by hearing from the applicant's attorney regarding their continuance request. So either Jennifer Ashton or Michael Birch, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Jennifer Ashton, Longleaf Law Partners, here today on behalf of the applicant. As you stated already, we are asking for a continuance to the June meeting, which I think is June 13th, if I'm not mistaken. We are trying to work through some additional, or not additional staff comments, but remaining staff comments, and to try to figure out some options for this project before we come to hearing. So we would just ask that we be continued to a time certain in June.
Okay, thank you. We are going to continue the evidentiary hearing to the June 14th, 2021 Board of Adjustment meeting. Thank you. And now we move to new business, evidentiary hearing 1, 322 Bragg Street, Triangle Building and Properties LLC property owner. It's a variance BOA 0015-2021. We'll be swearing in the staff and the participants, beginning with the staff. Keegan McDonald, the planning staff case presenter.
Present.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Justin Rometta, zoning administrator.
Present.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And to our participants, when I call your name, please state your name and address for the record, and I will reaffirm your oath. William Choi, applicant.
My name is William Choi. My address is 602 East Hargett Street, Raleigh, North Carolina. I do.
We also have William Choi, witness.
That, I believe, is an error in the submissions.
Okay, thank you. We had two signups. We just wanted to be sure. Luke Costanza, witness.
Yes, Luke Costanza, 107 Fayetteville Street, Suite 300, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27601.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, your presentation.
All right, thank you very much. So I'll begin by reading the nature of request for this specific case. So this is a request for a variance of 2 parking spaces from the parking requirements set forth in section 712C of the Unified Development Ordinance for single unit living to provide no on-site parking in conjunction with a detached house on the 0.05 acre property zoned R10 and Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District South Park, located at 322 Bragg Street. So here is a street view image. I believe it's from 2019 or 2020. Just want to show this to you. I think it contextualizes the site a little bit better. Obviously, the property is located along Bragg Street. It's one of a series of fairly small parcels. They are zoned R10 and within a neighborhood conservation overlay district as described. However, they are substandard by normal R10 requirements in terms of lot width. And the code does make special allowances for substandard lots to be constructed on. In this case, though, the South Park NCOD provides for this narrow lot width, and that was instituted in recognition that many lots in this area do not have the requisite lot width to conform to the base zoning district standards. And so there is legal permissibility to move forward with constructing a single detached house on the lot, provided, however, that the applicants adhere to all of the requirements in the UDO. In this case, they of course have to abide by setback requirements, which eat into the buildable area, and then also providing off-street parking to service the use. And so the applicant has provided plans showing their intention to provide the necessary setbacks both to the side, rear, and primary street. However, they are seeking relief from the provision to provide 2 on-site parking spaces. The main constraint here being the narrow lot width and the inability to locate proper driveway and off-street parking spaces on the site with the desired floor plan and house footprint that they are looking to build. So the applicant has provided a few exhibits just detailing how they would be able to accommodate the 2 spaces. This is really just for the board's information to see the constraints they're working with and to better understand whether or not this meets the level of hardship as described in the variance application, as the applicant has provided responses to. So here you can see the condition if 2 parking spaces were to be provided adjacent to the home, and that what that would leave in terms of footprint for the dwelling. In addition, they've provided an exhibit to show how 2 parking spaces could be accommodated at the ground level, noting that the South Park NCOD has more stringent maximum building height regulations than the base zoning. I believe it's approximately 29 feet. So they are obviously then constrained both laterally and vertically in terms of the building envelope. And so these just help, again, to detail those constraints. Staff doesn't have much comment on the application other than that the number of off-street parking spaces is obviously difficult to attain on the site given all the other parameters. However, while understanding that the floor footprint, and maybe overall floor area would be severely impacted by providing 2 spaces, it's possible that 1 could be provided without deleterious impact on livable area. Of course, it would still eat into part of the site, but would open up that amount of space for more livable area if just 1 space was provided. Of course, that would still necessitate a variance, but to a lesser degree. And I think this last image is just labeled 2007, as you can see here, just showing that there was a home existing on the site. As you can see, it was in a similar style to the ones along that portion of the block face. So there has been a detached house here in the past, and it was demoed at some point, and now the applicant and the property owner are looking to rebuild on this site. So that concludes my commentary. Happy to answer any questions, and if not, I can pass it off to the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Board members, do you have any questions? Okay, hearing none, let's move along. Mark Goldberger is the attorney representing the applicant, so you may proceed with your presentation and calling witnesses.
Good afternoon. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
I'm going to call William Chow, and he is going to make a presentation to you, and he also can answer any questions that may arise. But he is going to put forth, I think he submitted all his evidence for it, and he is willing to speak.
Okay, Mr. Goldberger, while I've got you, I would remind you to ask to admit any information you submitted to the record.
Yes.
Yes, you're requesting that be done?
I'm sorry, was it a question to me, Will Choi, or was that to Mark Goldberger?
To Mr. Goldberger, your exhibits and application.
Yes.
Okay, you're submitted that to the record.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I
Thank you.
appreciate just clarifying that. Okay, Mr. Choi, you may go ahead.
Great. I'd like to thank the board for hearing this case today. I have not a whole lot more detail to go through other than the very detailed and thorough explanation that Mr. McDonald already gave. Thank you for that. So I will just try to add a little bit more color to the conditions present on the site so that it could provide some additional information for the board to consider. So moving to the next slide here. So once again, this is the site at the intersection of Bragg Street and Bloodworth Street that we are discussing, which is currently vacant. And next slide. And once again, a comparison of the current conditions versus existing condition. The existing houses in these series of lots were constructed in, I believe, 1920s, according to Wake County tax records. And it appears to me that they were kind of constructed in conjunction with each other in series at the same time to create a cluster of housing in the same manner and style and scale. So if we move on to the next slide. Once again, this is a street view from 2007 showing the house previous to demolition, sort of in line with the scale of the neighborhood and the lots adjacent to them. Next slide. So here's the survey of the property as it exists. Next. And the 2 spaces per unit requirement as mandated by Chapter 7 of the UDO, which we are asking complete relief from. Next slide. And to reiterate, the lot happens to have a substandard width at just below 30 feet. And additionally, one point I would like to cover that wasn't covered before is that the lot lines are arranged such that the interstitial spaces between the homes are very difficult to use for purposes of parking because of the lot lines being drawn squarely in between the interstitial spaces, as one might expect. So while some curb cuts exist on the site, and in the previous ownership of this lot, I believe that these curb cuts are used sort of like an access way to get to the backyard, but perhaps not a parking space per se. So these curb cuts and interstitial spaces that do exist between the homes are, once again, because of the way they straddle the lot line, difficult to use for parking purposes. So next slide. And this is the what might the footprint look like if we were to provide 2 spaces, which obviously severely limits the footprint to 500 square feet or so for the building. And beyond just the quantity of square footage here, I think the more important aspect is that the width becomes so narrow at 12 foot 5 that a plan becomes quite unviable. So perhaps if this were a 500 square feet that, was more squarish in shape, it might be a viable lot for layouts. But as it stands with these parking spaces interjecting into the lot, this is a very difficult shape to arrange a house on. Next slide. So what we suggest is a relief from the parking requirements, which would then just allow the footprint to be a resultant of the remaining UDO standards that dictate the setbacks. So that would result in a 807 square foot footprint, which is a much more viable shape and size for a single family home of this type. So if we go to the next slide. Once again, here's a proposed footprint in context, and next slide. Abiding by those remaining standards of setbacks would result in, a housing footprint roughly in the footprint of what's in dashed line there, which would be not at all out of character with the surrounding homes. And part of the request for variance, stems from the desire to maintain this continuity of housing at the same scale in this particular block. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Choi? Okay, we have no additional participants to sign up either in support or in opposition to this case. There's no rebuttal necessary or closing statements. Staff, anything further from you?
Not at this time.
Okay, then let us close the evidentiary hearing and move to our board deliberations on this variance case.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any information about parking on that street or complaints, issues? Or is it designated as far as zone? Is it limited to that?
Mr. McDonald?
Yes, thanks for the question. The short answer, I guess, is I'm not sure. We didn't hear from any neighbors of any specific parking concerns. It's my understanding that many of the homes on that street utilize the on-street parking to service the homes themselves, just given the narrow lot condition that exists there and the number of small lots too. I have to investigate further as to whether there's a permit parking program in that neighborhood. I'm not sure, but to date, I haven't heard anything from surrounding neighbors about parking concerns.
Okay.
But there currently are houses that do not have on-site parking.
Luke Costanza here. That is correct. I actually own a few other parcels on that street as well. And so the immediate next door neighbor to the right-hand side utilizes off-street parking, as does the two neighbors across the street as well from time to time. But in general, on Bragg Street as a whole, there is off-street parking used, especially on the even side of the street like we are on 322.
Okay, just for the record, I was premature in closing the evidentiary hearing since we're still asking questions and getting information. So I'm going to reopen the evidentiary hearing in the event that there are more questions to be asked and more testimony to be provided. So Mr. Costanza, I appreciate you jumping in there. I should have gotten ahead of you with that.
No problem at all. Just one more parcel. We do just one house up. There's the corner of Bragg and Bloodworth. We currently have 4 lots right there that will be under construction, and all 4 of those we are able to do off-street parking on. And so just so you know, the immediate new construction that will be coming up next to there will have off-street parking. And so it's not like there's going to be additional spaces or crowding. just the next set of houses. So just wanted to give that information as well.
And Mr. Swink, this is Keegan McDonald again. I was able to verify, at least through the city's website, that there does not appear to be a residential permit program in that neighborhood or vicinity of that address.
Thank you for reaching out and doing that. Appreciate that. Ms. Rudisil, more questions? Okay, anyone else on the board with additional questions? Okay, well then I am going to close the evidentiary hearing and move it to board for deliberations. And a motion. Anyone?
John Coons, I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Koontz. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Mile, I believe I got you in there as a second. Followed closely by Mr. Sutton, but we'll go with Mr. Mile. Any further discussion? Then, Ms. Puccini, let's move to a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, sir. On the motion to approve, Mr. Koontz?
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mile.
Approve.
Thank you, Chairman Swink.
Approve.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisil.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton.
Approved.
Thank you. That makes 5.
Okay, thank you very much. Let us move along to evidentiary hearing 2, 5706 Rock Quarry Road, 3801 Pearl Road, 3831 Pearl Road. Aspen Spring Housing Associates LLC property owner. It's a variance BOA 0019-2021. The applicant's attorney informed staff ahead of today's meeting that the applicant would like to continue the evidentiary hearing on this matter to the next Board of Adjustment meeting in June. The applicant's attorney is present today, so we'll start by hearing from the applicant's attorney regarding this continuance request. Ms. Maddox, welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Yes, I represent this applicant, and we are hopeful that a text change, which is wending its way through the system, will be approved and effective by the time we need it in June. And so therefore, we'd like to request that this matter be deferred.
Okay, we'll continue the evidentiary hearing to the June 14th, 2021 Board of Adjustment meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, evidentiary hearing 3. This is 1111 Pettis Place, John T. Swayze, property owner. It's a variance BOA 0014-2021. We'll go right to the participants for your swearing in. If when I call your name, please state your name and address for the record, and I will reaffirm your oath. John Swayze.
North Carolina, 27610.
Ms. Puccini, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Swayze, would you mind repeating your address, please? Because we're cut off all the time.
1111 Pettis Place, Raleigh, 27610.
We're getting an echo. I don't think we got the street.
Let's see. Not sure how I fix that.
Mr. Chairman, it sounds like somebody is in here twice. That's why we have echo.
If someone has both a phone and a computer.
Aquila, are you able to see that?
What about now?
I am.
better.
I'm looking. Someone, yeah, I placed John's audio on mute, so.
Okay. Thank you, Aquila. Okay, we're
You're
not
welcome.
hearing the echo now. So I apologize, Mr. Swayze. Could you please just state your street address again? Because we're having trouble with that.
Place?
No.
No.
Could I recommend Ms. Stewart is the applicant's attorney? Maybe Ms. Stewart's able to give us the address.
Ms. Stewart, do you have that address?
Yes, thank you. It's 1111 Pettis Place.
Pettis Place. Of course,
That's right.
that's the case. All right.
That's right. I would also like to note, if it's possible, I have Craig Bethel, the architect, on a cell phone here with me, and if possible, I'd love to have him sworn in as well.
Would you hear that name again, please?
Craig Bethel.
What's that last name?
Bethel, Bethel.
Ms. Hill, is that okay? Did we have it? Do we need advance notice or?
I think given the circumstance so that they can have their witnesses present their case, and with the technology issue, I think that would be fine as long as he reaffirms his oath for the record.
Okay, good enough.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Swayze, we're going to affirm your oath now. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I have him unmuted.
Mr. Swayze, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, we're not hearing anything now.
Yeah, he's unmuted.
Mr. Swayze, you still with us?
Yes, sir. My phone went off and I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And Craig Bethel, would you state your name and address for the record, please?
Craig Bethel, 422 South Bloodworth Street, Raleigh, North Carolina.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great, great, thank you. Mr. McDonald, your presentation, please.
All right, bear with me one moment.
Of course.
So I'll start off by reading the nature of request for this case. So this is a multi-part request. The first being a 4-foot variance to the side lot line setback requirements set forth in section 221B3 of the UDO that results in a side lot line setback of 6 feet from the eastern property line, and a 4-foot variance from the sum of side setback requirements set forth in UDO section 221B4 that results in a sum of side setback of 16 feet in order to legalize the existing detached house and construct a 2,525 square foot addition on the 0.14 acre property zoned R4 and located at 1111 Pettis Place. So here is a street view image of the property. So there is an existing home on the site that, to my understanding, is just one level. The applicant is looking to construct an addition on the property. And I will try my best to kind of detail what's being displayed here. But in general, you can see the larger rectangle towards the bottom of the image represents the existing detached house. The applicant is looking to construct a 2nd-story addition, so building vertically on the site, and then also horizontally out towards the rear. So in total, there will be 2,525 square feet of additional space. The shaded area in this image, which is shown as a long rectangle along the right side of the building, that is the space both of the existing and proposed structure that will be within the allowable setback on that eastern property line and what's necessitating the variance. So the applicant is looking to keep that or retain that existing setback as it is today. The change being that, of course, there'll be a vertical and lateral additions to the existing structure. Staff does not have much comment related to the application. This is, of course, pretty similar to some other requests the board has seen of late, in that they have an existing property with this nonconformity, and they're looking to basically preserve the side wall as it relates to that property boundary. and just maintain that reduced setback. I will note in relation to variance criteria number 1, that there is substantial hardship. Staff would just note that the addition would constitute a 200% plus increase in the existing gross floor area. Per the tax record, where the heated floor area is shown as 1,104 square feet, and the proposed total floor area would be 3,629 square feet. Outside of that, I have no further comment. I'm happy to try to answer any questions. If there are none, I can pass it off to the applicant.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonald. Board members, any questions? Okay, let's move along to the applicant. Ms. Stewart, you may proceed with your presentation and call in witnesses.
Thank you. I would like to begin by requesting that our application and presentation materials be submitted to the record.
Thank you.
I'd also like to note, I appreciate Mr. McDonald's presentation. I wanted to be clear that the increase in floor area, the comparison there was between the current heated floor area and the complete area that's being proposed. That does include an unheated garage area. So the actual increase would be from 1,247 square feet to 1,997 square feet. So that's about 530 square feet less heated area. So just to kind of correct that. One moment. Slide. So this slide is just to give you a general overview of the character of the area and how this house fits into it. Next slide, please. And since you've seen this, I won't go into much detail here. I just wanted to show you this before zooming in so you can take a better look at it. But Keegan did a good job of describing the 3 portions of this request, with that front portion being simply a vertical addition, and then a smaller addition behind that that's a 2-story addition with the garage behind that, and all of that maintaining that existing side setback. Next slide, please. So here to zoom in, this is that front portion, the existing house, where the request is simply to put a 2nd-story addition that would follow that same side setback line. Next slide, please. And then, of course, the addition and the garage behind it would also continue to follow the existing setback line. And that's really to avoid having to create an interior and an exterior notch at this location. That would really negatively impact the interior space with little benefit, given that the side setback would remain as is. This is a good point to point out that what the hardship is here. And so strict application of the ordinance here would require that an otherwise permitted 2nd-story addition to the existing house, as well as that extension toward the back, would be stepped back on one side. So as you look at the house from the front, it would have a sort of a notch on the right side where the 2nd story meets the setback and the 1st story does not. And then, of course, moving toward the back of the house, there would be a notch where all of it were stepped back. Next slide, please. Again, just showing that alignment of facades. Now, this is not proposed to change, so that alignment would remain in place. And to move to the 2nd criteria, that the hardship results from conditions peculiar to the property. And here we have a house that was constructed in 1942. And this was prior to application of the current side setback requirement. And so this is peculiar to the property. And the 3rd criteria, that the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant, is also met since that requirement came in after the home was built 80 years ago. Next slide, please. This is a rear view of the house. It does have double frontage here. And so this is just showing the location of that proposed addition. Next slide, please. And to go back to kind of the overview of the area, extending the house to the rear would bring it more in line with its existing neighbors today. Next slide, please. And then here, this is the roadway that is to the rear of the house. And here you see on that left side, across the street from the property in question here, some of the more recent homes in the neighborhood are 2-story homes. So this is sort of a trend for the neighborhood. And to get to the 4th variance criteria, that the variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, and substantial justice is achieved. Here, this is a modest request to invest in improving an 80-year-old house to serve modern needs and avoid becoming obsolete, with the horizontal and vertical bounds demonstrated by nearby homes. So very much in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. And for these reasons, the impact of the requested variance to the side setback requirements will have a minimal impact on the surrounding neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from you?
No, our other witnesses are here and available for questions.
Great, we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Board members, what are your questions for Ms. Stewart or her witnesses?
This is Steve Kinney. Ms. Stewart, thanks for your presentation. I might have missed some, but I didn't quite follow you about the notches and the hardship. Could you please elaborate a little bit?
Sure. So if we could go back to, let's go back to the second slide. And this is the very high level overview of kind of the site plan. That's the one. So I understand that you can't read the words on this one, but the big picture here is if you see how the house is divided, the proposed house is divided into essentially 3 blocks. You can see that porch on the front, and behind that you have kind of 3 sections of the house. And that first section represents the existing house. Thank you. That's very helpful. And so that is the existing house with its existing setbacks there. And so the gray area on the right-hand side of the screen, what that represents for that first block, the one outlined in green, what that represents is a second-story addition, and it would effectively just duplicate the existing house. So it wouldn't change the setbacks at all for that area. And so if we were to have to meet the ordinance here, that first floor wouldn't have to move. It could stay where it is, but the second floor would have to be outside of that shaded area. So as you look at the house from the front, the first floor would be wider only on the right-hand side than the second floor, which would have to be notched in. And so that is one of the pieces of the hardship. The second piece, as you move back behind that existing house today to the areas outlined in light blue and more of a purple blue, those areas would be new additions. And so what you would end up with there is you actually wouldn't have an existing structure sitting within that setback. They would all sort of notch in there to stay out of the gray area that's shown. So you'd end up with a notch inside the house as well as in the yard. And so that's where, the hardship is not being able to use that existing line of the house and to continue the straight line back.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Keeney. Any other board member questions? Okay, well, we had no one else signed up to speak either in support or in opposition. So, Mr. McDonald, anything further from you in this regard?
Not relevant to the criteria per se, but just want to recognize that it seems like there was some miscommunication related to the size of the addition. So I do apologize for that. And to note that it is true that attached parking may not be conditioned per se, but in terms of setback regulations, of course, it does have to adhere to the setback of the principal structure if it's attached and enclosed. So there is a splitting of hairs there, but I just wanted to make that clear for the board's consideration.
Okay, thank you. So with that, again, Ms. Stewart, I gave you the opportunity, but just since he spoke, anything further from you?
No, thank you. I agree. I think Keegan and I are on the same page there.
Very good. Okay, thanks. In that case, let us close the evidentiary hearing and move to our board deliberations. And I certainly would welcome a motion.
John Kuntz, motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Kuntz. We have a second.
Second.
Mr. Sutton, thank you for a second. We have a motion to approve and a second. Is there further discussion? Then let us move to a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the motion to approve, Mr. Kuntz.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Approved. Thank you. Chairman Swink.
Approved.
Thank you. Ms. Rudisil.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mile.
Approve.
Thank you. That makes 5.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, let's move along. Evidentiary hearing 4. This is 512 Worth Street, Grayson Homes LLC property owner. This is a variance, BOA 0013-2021. Let me begin by introducing Eric Hodge, our planning staff case presenter, so I may swear him in. Mr. Hodge.
Thank you.
Okay, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And to our participants, when I call your name, please state your name and address for the record, and I will reaffirm your oath. Mike Poupard, applicant.
Yes.
Do you state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, it's Mike Popard at 1005 Collins Drive, Raleigh, North Carolina.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And thank you. And Grant Popard.
Yes.
Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Grant Popard, 104 Dartmouth Road, Raleigh, NC.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hodge, welcome.
Thank you. This is a request for a variance from the maximum percentage a driveway can comprise of the front yard, which is normally 40%, as set forth in the Unified Development Ordinance, section 1.5.5.d. Secondly, they're seeking a 1.5 foot variance from the driveway setback set forth in Unified Development Ordinance, section 2.2.7.f, which is for residential infill compatibility. And lastly, they're seeking a 1.5 foot variance from the driveway entrance radius setbacks set forth in section 9.5.1.e of the Raleigh Street Design Manual in order to construct a detached house and a 2-car driveway that results in a front yard comprised of 58% driveway with a 1 foot side yard driveway setback, which out at the street only has a 2 foot driveway entrance radius setback. This is a 0.07 acre property, zone residential 10, and South Park Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District, and again is located at 512 Worth Street. And it takes just a minute for my computer to catch up. There we go. This is an aerial showing the lot in question. The South Park overlay ordinarily requires a 40-foot wide lot. This is a pre-existing lot and is just over 30 feet wide. I think it's 30.88 feet wide out at the street. So almost 10 feet too narrow per today's standards. But similarly to the first case you discussed on today's agenda, it is a pre-existing legal non-conforming lot, and as such is entitled under our code a single-family dwelling, provided it can either meet the standards set forth in the code or seek and secure variance relief from the board, which is what they're here to do today. They're proposing, this is a survey just showing where the existing dwelling sits on the lot and the driveway there today, serving just 1 car. Today's UDO requires 2 off-street parking spaces for a single-family detached house, and that is what they are proposing. They're cantilevering the 2nd floor out over the 1st floor so that they can meet the Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District front yard setback, which is based on a contextual representation of that block face. So the house would otherwise need front yard setback relief in order to be able to provide an off-street parking space because they don't have the depth needed between the face of the house and the street. However, they are cantilevering, so that is meeting the front yard setback, but they have a 2-space wide proposed driveway. So an 18 by 18 pad that will accommodate 2 cars side by side. And by doing so, that pushes them over the 40% allowed limit for a front yard area, as well as their encroaching into the side yard setback set forth in the infill compatibility rules. And I believe the existing driveway today is already substandard in terms of its radius out of the street as required by the driveway manual. Staff does not oppose the request. Similarly to the earlier case, this neighborhood sees a fair amount of parking relief variances in one form or another. Sometimes people propose no additional off-street parking because they can't accommodate it because of these rules, or the lot in and of itself, they just can't accommodate it and the house. Other people have chosen to split the difference and seek maybe a 1-space parking variance. But we also have seen cases such as this where they're seeking to provide the required parking, but in order to do so, they need some relief from the dimensional standards associated with that parking. Unless you have any questions of me at this time, that would conclude my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hodge. Board members, do you have questions? Okay, let us move along then to Raz Raspberry, the attorney. You may proceed with your presentation and calling witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Francis Raspberry with the Colley Pigeon Law Firm, 333 Fayetteville Street, representing the applicant, Grayson Homes LLC in this case. I think Mr. Hodges very well summarized the contents of the application, and we'd like to ask Mr. Poupard, Mr. Mike Poupard, as our first witness to please offer his testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think Eric Hodge did present it well. Again, as you know, the hardship of trying to get 2 off-street parking spots in a 30-foot wide lot, it's probably next to nothing, and still meeting the 40% rule too. The driveway next door to the east of this, their radius already encroaches if you extend the property line down. So you can see it from that plot plan. So it'd be difficult to even put a single car lane on the lot and still maintain even getting a car even on the street. So that's why we felt better just to do the 2-car parking on the property itself rather than try to waste any space on the street itself that wouldn't provide enough space for a parking spot too.
Okay.
Anyway, we do meet the front and side and rear setbacks with this proposal. All we are is just asking for the driveway relief.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Raspberry, anything else from your side?
Mr. Chairman, we have no further witnesses, no further testimony to offer.
Okay. I would ask that you, any application or exhibits that you provided in advance, if you would please ask to have them admitted into the record.
Sorry. I didn't do anything looking at right.
Mr. Raspberry?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, we had a little battle of the mute buttons here, and if I could ask, we lost the last 15 seconds, I'm afraid.
Okay. Your application and exhibits that were provided in advance, would you please ask that they be admitted
We
to the
would,
record?
Mr. Chairman, ask that they be submitted into the official record.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, board members have some questions? Anyone? Okay, we have no additional participants to speak in support or in opposition to this case. No board questions. Mr. Raspberry, anything further from you?
Mr. Chairman, the only thing we would offer is we believe that the 4 variance standards have been well satisfied, and we think this plan represents the best trade-off, trade-off in dealing with the size and shape limitations of this lot and the regulatory constraints that apply to the lot. And that's all we would have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hodge, anything further from you?
No, sir, not at this time.
In that case, we will close the evidentiary hearing and move to our board for deliberations and a motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisill. We have a motion to approve. May I have a second?
John Coons, second.
Mr. Coons, thank you very much. We have a motion to approve and a second. Any further deliberation or discussion? And let's move to our roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the motion to approve, Ms. Rudisill.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Coons.
Approved.
Thank you, Chairman Swink.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mile.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton.
Approved.
Thank you. That makes 5.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Moving along to our evidentiary hearing number 5. This is 7517 Haymarket Lane, Philip Miller, property owner. This is a variance, BOA 0017-2021. Our participants today, as I call your name, would you please state your name and your address for the record, and I will reaffirm your oath. Let's begin with Phil Miller, the applicant.
Philip C. Miller, 7712 Harps Mill Road.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And Patty Hildreth.
Tricia Hildreth, 1107 Great Falls Court, Nightdale.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Do.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hodge?
This is a request for a variance for complete relief from the active stormwater control measures set forth in Unified Development Ordinance, Section 9.2.2, in order to subdivide Lot 6, Book of Maps 2005, page 2467, into 2 lots in order to construct a single-family homes on each resulting lot, where said property totals 1.3 acres that are zoned residential 6 and are located at 7517 Haymarket Lane. The property owner back in 2005, which was Mr. Miller still at that time, combined the 2 original lots from this development. And when they did so, they created a lot in excess of 1 acre. Now in 2005, the city's stormwater regulations were different, and I don't know that the impacts would have been the same at that time. However, a few years back, the city adopted some additional stormwater regulations for older lots, including the neighboring lots that were essentially grandfathered prior to 2001 when the city adopted stormwater regulations. And at that time, we adopted regulations based on the zoning of the property and essentially exempted impervious amounts up to varying thresholds based on the zoning from having to do stormwater control devices on the lots. So Mr. Miller has proposed a condition with their application, essentially proposing to cap the impervious surfaces if this variance were to be approved at 51%, which is what the residential 6 zoning would otherwise carry for the neighboring lots that were grandfathered and not tinkered with since 2001. The 2 lots to the north of this, going toward the corner of Harps Mill and Haymarket, are zoned R4, and so they only carry a 38% impervious surface limit per lot. The other lots going to the east along this side of Haymarket, similar to the subject property, are zoned residential 6, and as noted, would carry a 51% impervious surface limit lot by lot. They could exceed those thresholds under our ordinance, but they would be subject to doing some sort of device. So the 51% is the maximum you can do without having to do some stormwater attenuation. Mr. Miller's condition proposes to allow that 51% impervious to be distributed amongst the 2 proposed lots disproportionately, either at the time of subdivision or building permit. The city stormwater staff doesn't necessarily oppose the condition of 51% impervious being restored to these 2 lots that essentially are going back to a very similar configuration to how they were created originally. This is the 2005 survey, I think, showing the recombination. And this is the proposed lot configuration. But stormwater staff does have some concerns about these lots trading impervious surface amongst each other, because that would be inconsistent with how impervious surfaces are handled for the other lots in the vicinity which were grandfathered. So they're seeking to potentially have a higher impervious surface limit on one of these lots, of course, at the detriment of the other lots. But that is where staff does raise some potential concern that would be a departure from the exemptions carried for surrounding lots. And as mentioned, the 2 lots immediately to the north, they have R4 zoning, so they're each capped as far as their maximum exemptions at only 38% per lot. So if lot 6 per se was to be the one Mr. Miller wanted to have a higher impervious surface limit on, it could be quite higher than the lot to the north. Now at 51%, it's already higher to the lot to the north, but as mentioned, all of the surrounding lots to the east only carry a 51% exemption. So staff would support the proposed request. However, we would suggest that the condition be limited for each lot exemption only to be exempted only up to 51% impervious, which is what the condition would have been had these lots not been recombined into excess of 1 acre and now being subsequently re-subdivided back. So that would essentially restore the original conditions and exemptions that those lots would have been afforded had the recombination not occurred. Unless you have any other questions of me at this time, that would conclude my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hodge. Board members?
We do have stormwater staff here as well, if you have any questions for them.
Thank you. We may. Board members, questions? Okay, I want clarification. I want to be sure I'm understanding this, and it'll obviously probably be a question for the applicant as well, but your take, Mr. Hodge, as I heard you say, they want to average the 51% over the 2 lots, meaning one of them could be, just pick a number, 60 and the other one 39 or whatever the right number would be.
Right, I can read you the exact language just for the record. The proposed condition is that there shall be no more than 51% impervious based on the existing lot size, as may be allocated by the developer among the 2 lots, with an impervious surface declaration recorded prior to conveyance of the first lot or issuance of the first building permit, whichever shall occur first. So theoretically, one could be at a higher percentage. For easy math, say a 51% impervious surface limit grants them, again, for easy math, 100 square feet of impervious. As you mentioned, one could eat up 60 square feet of that, and the other would only be limited with 40, at the remainder. Again, those numbers are not realistic. They're just for simple math purposes. But yes, the distribution of whatever 51% of 1.3 acres is in terms of impervious could be disproportionately shared under the applicant's proposed condition. And staff would be comfortable that each lot was granted a 51% exemption per lot, which is what the original stormwater rules would have afforded them had the lots not been recombined and then subsequently subdivided back out.
Okay. Who is the stormwater staff person with you?
I believe Ben Brown.
Mr. Brown, I'd like to swear you in because I have a question for you.
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. In regard to this case, what if stormwater has any reservations about this suggestion for the two lots? Could you explain those so that I might understand them?
Yeah. As Eric went through a little bit, if you were to grant these lots the 51% impervious per lot, that's what the impervious maximum would have been for these lots if they were never recombined. The applicant's condition mentions sort of an uneven share between those two lots and setting up a legal agreement at some point to share this impervious amongst those two lots, which is not something we would normally have with these maximum impervious limits. So staff would be more comfortable with not having that legal agreement out there, making it confusing and perhaps unequal as far as the impervious surface like allowed per these lots. And depending on whichever one comes in, you could get more impervious used up with the first building permit issued than you would with the second building permit. And that may put the second building permit in some sort of bind or issue like that they would have to solve later on their own. So staff would feel more comfortable with just having the 51% max impervious cover each lot.
So some of this is sort of as an enforcement issue, just trying to stay on top of that.
Yes, that, and just kind of worried about long term for the future of whatever lot comes in second.
Okay.
To be honest.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Board members, any questions from you?
Eric, this is Marvin Butler. Eric, did you say that the lots north of that was 38%?
Yes, because they have R4 zoning, they're only afforded 38%.
Okay. All right.
The higher the density zoning district, the higher the percent of impervious that the zoning exemption from controls go. So R4 is 38%, R6 is 51%, and R10 has an exemption up to 65%, just so you kind of understand our approach to these exemptions. And these were lots that prior to 3 or 4 years ago, I can't recall the exact date, were completely exempt from impervious surface limits because they, in most cases, predated our stormwater regulations. But because there was starting to be more development and redevelopment, and oftentimes larger homes and appurtenances on some of these older lots, there was starting to be more neighbor to neighbor flooding issues in parts of town that we, had been developed for years and years. And so the city adopted these maximum impervious surface limits on lots that had been there before completely exempt from stormwater because they were put in it at a time that we didn't have stormwater control devices set up for neighborhoods. So the city doesn't really want to get in the business necessarily of having each homeowner have a stormwater device on their individual lot. So we've developed these maximum impervious surface limits that correspond to what a typical lot of that zoning district would be sized for, and how much land would typically be needed to accommodate a reasonable single-family home on those lots. So that's how those various percent thresholds were set. So an R4 lot theoretically is typically bigger than an R6 lot, and so therefore you don't necessarily need more house just because you have more lot. So that's why the percent exemptions go down as the density goes down as well.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Other questions for staff? Okay, let us move along to the applicant then. Jennifer Ashton, Michael Birch, either one of you may proceed with your presentation and calling your witnesses.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. It's Michael Birch with Longleaf Law Partners. I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Jennifer Ashton, but first wanted to just give a short introduction since she joined us in November during this pandemic and hasn't appeared before you yet. Again, Jennifer joined us in November after practicing for 15 years in Florida in private practice, serving as city attorney for a number of jurisdictions in the West Palm area. So I can promise you, after having worked with her for 6 months or so, that she's a much more competent and polished attorney than me. And so it is with great pleasure that I turn it over to her and appreciate the opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birch.
Thank you, Michael. This is Jennifer Ashton. And thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the board members for allowing us to speak with you today. As Michael mentioned, I am a land use attorney with Longleaf Law Partners. Our address for the record is 4509 Creedmoor Road. That's in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I am here today on behalf of the property owner, Mr. Phil Miller. He is the owner of the property at 7517 Haymarket Lane. And Mr. Miller is here. He is going to be providing some testimony in just a little bit about why he's asking for this variance request. I also have with us today Patty Hildreth. She is an engineer who specializes in stormwater management, and she will be talking to you all and providing testimony about how we are going to be performing stormwater on this site. Just to clarify our position with respect to that condition that you all just had a discussion on. I apologize if our language was not clear enough. We have absolutely no objection to limiting the impervious maximums to 51% per lot, as requested by the stormwater staff. We were just trying to kind of figure out a way to actually codify that in some recorded document, but and that's why that language is in the condition about having a declaration. But if staff prefers to it just being a set maximum, that is perfectly fine with us. We have no problem with that. And Mr. Chair, for the record, if I can admit our presentation and application materials into the record, I'd like to do that at this time.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So a quick summary of our variance request. Mr. Hodge went through this already with you. I'll try not to be too repetitive. We are asking for relief from the active stormwater control measures that are set forth in the UDO in order to subdivide an existing lot 6 into 2 lots. The 2 new lots, which I'll show you a little bit more in a moment, will have approximately the same or similar property boundary lines as they did prior to 2005. And the variance is going to allow us to construct a single family home on each lot. Mr. Miller will be able to testify in a few moments about his intent for the lots. And he is actually building the 1 lot for himself for his own personal use. And then he's intending on also helping develop the 2nd lot. He's not intending to sell this off. So, stormwater staff had mentioned a concern about what happens to the 2nd lot coming in. Just to give the board some reassurance, Mr. Miller will be involved in the development of both of the lots. And just on this slide too, we do have the language mentioned from our proposed condition. As we just discussed, we are fine limiting the language to say something along the lines of there shall be no more than 51% impervious for each lot based on the existing lot size, period. And then the rest of that language can go away. All right, if I can get to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is an aerial that you saw earlier. This is the combined lot 6 and 7, currently lot 6. One thing I did want to point out, and I'll show you more on the subdivision maps in just a moment, there is a very large existing drainage pond behind us that serves not only the lots within the Northridge subdivision, but also the golf course. And there is an existing drainage easement that I will point out. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is the plat from 1974. This shows lot 6 and 7 before they were recombined. It's the two blue stars in the lower right-hand corner. You will also see that there is a 10-foot drainage easement behind all of these lots. The way that this subdivision was created is with this drainage easement in mind, the lots were supposed to drain to the back and go into the existing pond. If we could go to the next slide, please. This is a map from 1989. I just wanted to show this because this is in the chain of title for this lot 6 and 7. And again, the two lots we're talking about have the blue stars on them, and the 10-foot drainage easement, it still exists as of 1989. If we could go to the next slide, please. And this is in 2005. As Mr. Hodge testified, the property owner, Mr. Miller, did recombine the two lots into one. But I did want to point out that the 10-foot drainage easement remained in place even after this recombination. If we could go on to the next slide. This is our proposal now. We are going to be subdividing the one lot back into two. You'll see the new property boundary line is pretty close to where the old boundary line is. Just to note, in 2005, there was a little piece of lot 4 that was added to lot 6. Lot 4 is the one that's noted on this drawing as 1.28 acres. That was a little tiny corner piece was added to lot 6, so that is one thing that is different. And if we could go to the next slide. And this is just a closer view of the property lines and how we're pretty close to what they were back in 2005. And if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. And now at this time, I'll call Mr. Miller to offer some testimony. And Mr. Miller, can you tell the board how long you have lived in the Northridge neighborhood?
Yes, sir. I'm at my current address, 7712 Harps Mill, for 15 years, which is less than 100 yards from the subject property. And I raised my adult children at 7501 Haymarket Lane for the 17 years before that, which is also less than 100 yards from the subject property.
And when you bought the subject property, what were you intending to do with it?
Two things, really. Being a longtime member and old school builder, I wanted to make sure the property stayed in hands that would not try to create maximum density and upset my current and future homes, as well as upset the neighborhood. And it has always been our plan to build my wife and I's final home there, which we were getting ready to do when we ran into this stormwater new thing.
And why are you trying to subdivide the lots again into two?
Couple reasons. On our current home, it was a home I built as a show home on Harps Mill Road that was 9,000 square feet, that we really didn't want that size home for ourselves. And so I'm 67 and my wife's 63, so we're going to downsize a bit. And the two lots in question are just so primo that we've had 20 years worth of request to be our neighbor, and now we have narrowed it down to two of our dear friends who I will build the second house for. So we're going to let them share in the beautiful view, and we certainly don't that big of a lot. There isn't any lot that big in all of Northridge. So.
And Mr. Miller, could you talk to the board about the types of hardships that you believe you'll encounter if you have to comply with installing actual stormwater infrastructure on your lots?
Yeah, this is all new to me. Oh, yes, and I'm sorry if I may, that all the initial stuff from staff, I had no idea. I have no desire to request that it be disproportionately distributed between the two lots. I'm absolutely fine with 51%. That was my intent the whole time. So I guess I didn't read your document close enough, and I hope that won't hold things up. But no, I have no intent to want to rearrange the impervious soils. I'm sorry. Tell me again your question, Jennifer, since I got
No
off track.
problem. No problem. Could you just explain to the board some of the hardships that you believe you'll encounter if you have to
Yes.
install the stormwater infrastructure on your lots?
Well, it's all new to me. I've been building for 40 years, and I've built dozens of houses in Northridge, and I've never come across this, so I didn't really know anything about it. Miss Hildreth has educated me a little bit, and so the hardships are, first off, and I guess the staff agreed that they don't want to be in the business of doing that, but I guess the way the statute's written, I fall into the same category as shopping centers and 100+ acre subdivisions. And we just want the two homes. She said that the way it's written, it could create $40,000 to $50,000 per lot of expense for the system. And she also said that you have to provide access and have annual inspections by the city and maintenance, and all that stuff is certainly intimidating for somebody my age. It's retiring. These are going to be the last two homes that I build. So we're at the end of our building career.
Mr. Miller, when you say she, are you referring to Patty Hildreth, the engineer?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you spoken to any of your neighbors surrounding you? And if yes, what have they said about this request?
Yes, ma'am. I've spoken to all of them. My wife spoke to a couple, but again, we've lived within 100 yards of here for 32 years. So, but I did go and ring the doorbells when the sign went up to tell them what was going on, and they are very excited that we didn't bail on our dream of building our house here. The big concern in our neighborhood are some of the half-acre and 2/3 acre lots getting chopped into 1/4 acre and 1/3 acre lots. So they're elated that there's only going to be 2 residences there versus 4 or 5. The property directly to the north of this, the city did allow somewhere between a half and a 2/3 acre lot to be divided into 2 already. And actually both of my lots as proposed will be bigger than that entire piece of property. So again, I'm still trying to look out for the character of the neighborhood, and for our personal use, we would not want to squeeze things in either.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Chair, I didn't have any more questions for Mr. Miller. Before I call my next witness, I didn't know if you wanted to have the board ask him questions.
Oh, we can hold our questions unless a board member has one very specific at this time for Mr. Miller. Why don't you go ahead with the rest of your presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, I'd like to call Patty Hildreth. And Patty, could you please give your name and business address again for the board?
Yes, this is Patricia Hildreth. I'm at 1107 Great Falls Court in Knightdale.
And could you tell them your profession and how many years you have been doing that profession?
I'm a professional engineer. I'm the owner of CMS Engineering PLLC, and I've been in the consulting engineering business for over 25 years.
And what is your experience in stormwater management?
I have designed stormwater control measures for everything from single-family residences to subdivisions, shopping centers, and self-storage facilities. And I also do annual inspections of stormwater control measures.
And if Mr. Miller was required to comply with all the stormwater control measures in the city's UDO, what would that look like on each lot for him?
So he would be required to detain the runoff from the impervious area. And that would either be done with an underground detention system or a dry detention basin or possibly a rain garden. And I have not run nitrogen calculations, but if the nitrogen runoff was excessive, they would have to not only detain the water, but treat the water.
And how much would that infrastructure cost per lot?
I estimate between $20,000 and $40,000 per lot, depending on which type of measure was used.
And if Mr. Miller is granted this variance and he's limited to 51% maximum impervious per lot, is he going to be creating any more stormwater on site than he would have been before 2005?
No, he won't. And because the impervious runoff is limited, or the impervious area is limited to 51% of the total area, the runoff would be the same whether it's one big lot or two smaller lots. And all of the runoff is going sheet flowing back to the golf course and across the fairway and into the pond.
And could you describe for the board real quick about the fairway and the filtering of any potential nitrogen and pollutants?
Yeah, so having the runoff sheet flow across the fairway, that helps the water absorb into the ground and also helps to remove the nutrients before it actually gets to the pond. And then the pond further helps in those things.
Mr. Chair, I don't have any more questions for Ms. Hildreth. I would like to have an opportunity to do a quick closing whenever you would like.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Board members, do you have any questions for either Mr. Miller or Ms. Hildreth? Okay, then Ms. Ashton, you may wrap up.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair and board members again. As I mentioned earlier, we are in agreement with staff's requested change to the condition to limit the maximum impervious area per lot to 51%. We believe that we've met the standards for receiving a variance in this case. There would be an unnecessary hardship that would result from the strict application of the ordinance. Mr. Miller did not realize in 2005 he'd be creating this issue for himself just by combining two lots into one. He is just asking to return the lots to their pretty close configuration to what they were prior to 2005. Ms. Hildreth testified we will not be creating any more stormwater runoff by doing this and limiting the impervious to 51% per lot. Mr. Miller did testify that there will be some hardship for him if he has to comply with the stormwater requirements, not only in costs, but also just the annual maintenance, insurance, and inspection requirements that go along with this kind of thing. And I did want to point out to the board one more time that there is an existing stormwater detention lake right behind these homes that is supposed to serve as stormwater retention area for the neighborhood. And with that being said, I do believe that we've met the requirements for granting a variance. And all of the neighbors that Mr. Miller has talked to said that they do not have an issue with this. So we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Once again, board, any questions? Okay, we had no one signed up either in support or opposition to speak today. So we can move along to any final opportunity for board questions. We've heard from Ms. Ashton her summary. Mr. Hodge or Mr. Brown, anything further from you?
Nothing from Eric at this time.
And nothing from stormwater either at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Then let us close the evidentiary hearing. I want to be clear, so there is a question I have, this is one of clarification, that they are open to the condition that there'll be no more than 51% impervious surface on each lot Is that written into the request as it is, or do we need to introduce that as a condition at this time?
This is Scott. I would make that a condition. And I've been trying to come up with some language that I think captures what they're asking to modify the proposed language of the original condition. I would want to make sure that, at least with Ben Brown, that it's reads the way it needs to be enforceable, to be enforced the way it's intended to be.
Well, I certainly welcome your help with that, because I would like to propose that this be approved with a condition. So I would like to get that condition. In preface to that, I would say I have comfort with this because they are next to the golf course. There is the basically sheeting opportunity that was explained, and then the detention pond. So it's a pretty good situation for managing the stormwater that comes off the site. Traditionally, I would be concerned about, stormwater is an important issue in our city, as it should be in every city, but it sounds like this is a pretty good circumstance. And if they're willing to limit the 51%, I'm pretty comfortable with going in that direction. So, Ms. Hill, if you have some language you could offer me, and I will offer it as a motion.
Yeah, and I would make sure, again, Ben, if you let me know, give me a thumbs up or down on this. So the condition is that the property is just subdivided into 2 lots, and the maximum impervious surface area of each resulting lot will not exceed 51% of the lot area.
That sounds good to stormwater staff.
Great. Well, if Mr. Puccini got that language, then I'm offering that as a condition and a motion to approve. And I will welcome a second.
I'll second.
I could not tell. Okay, Mr. Mile, thank you. We have a motion to approve with a condition and a second. Any further discussion? Then let us move to our motion, our roll call vote.
Hey, Mr. Swink, real quick, sorry, just before you vote, can we just ask Ms. Ashton really quickly that condition meets what the intent? Sorry.
I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. I apologize. I should have done that. Ms. Ashton, you've heard our language. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Great, super, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Hill. Keep me honest. Okay, we move to a roll call vote here.
And to clarify, Ms. Hill will send me the right language for that condition, which will be included in the minutes.
Certainly.
The motion to approve with the condition as outlined by Ms. Hill. Chairman Swink?
Approve.
Thank you. Mr. Mile?
Approve.
Thank you. Ms. Rudisill?
Approve.
Thank you. Mr. Coons?
Approve.
Thank you. Mr. Sutton?
Yes, approve with condition. Yes.
That makes 5 with the condition.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Okay, now we can move to evidentiary hearing 6. This is 2900 O'Berry Street. Oliver and Betty Bradley, property owners, the variance BOA 0018-2021. Staff has informed the board that there was an error in the legal advertisement for this case, which requires the case to be re-advertised and deferred to a later BOA meeting. Staff will work with the applicant and the applicant's attorney to reschedule this matter for a later Board of Adjustment meeting. So that case is deferred.
This is Eric. If I could just add, the case may or may not be coming back because similar to Mrs. Maddox's other matter, as she noted, there's a text change pending that may resolve this issue right around the time of the June BOA meeting. She's working with her clients to confirm whether they'd like to proceed or not, but we believe that the text change will be adopted and in effect mid-June. So probably no need for that variance, but certainly they're entitled to seek it if they do want to buy the 2-week opportunity that may offer them.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Hodge, for bringing that to our attention. So those are our cases for today. Let's move now to our other business, starting with the approval of the minutes for our April 19th, 2021 board meeting. Anyone need to offer any edits, suggestions, corrections? If not, let's have a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mile. Thank you, Mr. Mile. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second? I'll second. I'll offer the second. Let's go for the roll call.
Thank you. On the motion to approve the minutes and findings of fact as presented, Mr. Mile?
Approve.
Thank you. Chairman Swink?
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Coates.
Approve.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisil.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton.
Now, I wasn't in attendance for the April 19th, but I have read the minutes and I do approve in that regard.
Yep, that's the standard.
That makes 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton, and thank you for that. Ms. Hill, anything from you today in a report?
No, nothing to report. I appreciate all the responses though for the special June meeting, and it's looking like June 22nd is the date, but tentatively that will be confirmed, and you guys will be updated on that as soon as we have the final date.
Great. Yes, thank you all for responding in a timely fashion so we can get that on the calendar.
Forgive me, Chairman. Catherine, what was the date for that meeting?
To be
So far?
confirmed, but it's most likely looking like June 22nd.
Thank you.
Maybe, possibly, it could be slightly, possibly, yes.
Pencil, use a pencil when you.
Yes,
schedule.
yes.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Okay. Anyone have anything else to offer today? We had to work through some audio difficulties there that we've been fortunate to have very few of those. So a little aggravation, but we handled it. So I think today went well. A lot of continued cases. So we may see them again, depending on this text change. So unless someone has something else, we will stand adjourned, and thank you all for a good meeting today. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thanks, Ralph.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care. Have a blessed day.
Absolutely. Thank you.